So spring is here. The leaves are green, flowers are blooming, as the average Briton's finances has been planted in a rose bed of fresh, steaming horse manure, in what the press has dubbed Awful April. As bills rise from council tax to energy and cars, despite some positives including an increase in the minimum wage and a modest rise in benefits, budgets are expected to be squeezed. So some good news. But it's good news in the way that a doctor telling you that they'll be amputating both your legs, but you will save money on purchasing new trousers going forward. After 50 years of an economic project started by everybody north of Grantham's least favourite human being in the post-war period, Maggie Thatcher, the working class and the middle classes in the UK are in a situation that looks like a Dickens novel, and increasingly like a steampunk version of medieval feudalism. What's been happening here is covered in greater detail over on the Gary's Economics YouTube channel in his latest video on how Labour, and whoever's in Westminster for that matter, is crushing your living standards. But to summarise Gary's very astute analysis, essentially the post-war period in Britain was a bit of a historical anomaly, where working class people held a greater share of the wealth and assets than is common when you look at most societies around the world today, or throughout history for that matter. I'd just call it progress. And either through accident or design, my money's on design by the way, the wealthy began to purchase those assets back, mainly houses, as this generation sold out for a cushy retirement. This went on for a few decades, with the rich eventually hoovering up all the assets accumulated by the working class in the initial post-war period. This in turn drove the price of housing higher and higher. Now, the housing market didn't collapse, as the banks kept the now assetless working class through mortgages driving up house prices further. But it then reached a point where we have been since 2008, where the working class have so few assets that the banks now deem them unsuitable for credit. And now the rich rent these same assets back via buy-to-let mortgages, which is the rent class world anyone from the millennial generation and younger knows as the reality of young adulthood in modern Britain, where the rich asset owners get increasingly richer with every passing year. Now, coupled with the decline in British industry, wage stagnation and inflation, the only way the British working class can now afford a roof over their head is via state subsidies, i.e. benefits of various sorts. The problem is the state was never factored into the Thatcherite programme of private wealth creation, and they are also poorer than they've ever been. And so governments print more money and get more debt to bond markets as a result. And did I mention the rich keep getting richer by the day? And now the Hoover bag is full of working class assets. The middle class has now been bagged too, and the UK has gone from a Keynesian post-war, relatively equitable society to a form of neo-feudalism. And the big Hoover Saurus Rex is now turning its asset-munching attentions on the middle class. And the only way to fix this before 99% of us are huddled under a single sheet of tarpaulin, sharing a turnip and a disposable vape with our 100 closest neighbours, is if we do what the right claimed to be doing when things swung from the old socialist state-run industry model of the post-1945 era to the privatisation, individualism, feeding frenzy that was and is the past 50 years. This model too has failed. Just like if a broken cash machine is pumping out hundreds of 50s every time you take out a tenner. You don't get to keep that. The machine is malfunctioning. And now we need a new style of government that faces the reality that only attacks on the elite asset-owning classes can save the people from the cliff we are all hurtling towards. Fortunately for us, we live in a democracy. And if enough of the people wake up to this reality, as they have, for example, when looking at the public response to the climate crisis, who represents us in our politics needs to align with the cause. Starting locally, your MPs, and the party policies and manifestos we demand. As I've said before, the government is a hostage to the bond markets and vulnerable to the influence of those same elites through party donations and other fundraising efforts. It is the people who bear the brunt, and it is the people that must now demand the change we need. Or it's turnips for dinner from now until eternity.